Think Story here to explain the unexplainable.
I have no, tolerance for the unexplainable.
You're not helping, Ralph. Today we're going to take a deep dive into HBO's The Outsider, examining all its clues as well as everything we know about the monster El Cuco. And you're going to want to stick around to the very end as we'll be going over that mysterious post-credit scene and what it means, so make sure to like and subscribe because we're ready to think story. As much as The Outsider is a story about solving the murder of a young child, it's equally the story of one man's struggle to believe in the unbelievable. Our protagonist Ralph Anderson is a stubborn detective who only believes in facts and evidence.
You keep your mind open. I'm just gonna look for facts, evidence, dumb cop shit like that.
In fact, when he tries to console Glory Maitland, the wife of suspected child murderer Terry Maitland, he tells her,
Whenever I find myself unable to uncover a reasonable explanation for a so-called inexplicable criminal act, it only means I haven't uncovered it yet.
over the course of the season, Ralph will be confronted with events that will challenge his worldview to make him question what is real. And what better way to have one's beliefs tested than by putting them up against someone who is the complete opposite? This comes in the form of Holly GIBNEY. Not only is she the opposite physically, being a young African-American female, but her worldview is one of belief, that there are things out there in the world we can't explain, and it's okay to believe in them. She believes in God, is the one who comes up with the El Cuco theory, and unlike Ralph, is open to hearing explanations that seem impossible. Whereas Ralph believes everything can be explained, Holly believes some things can't, and when they can't be explained, the answer is God.
Holly, do you believe in God?
Of course. He's the explanation.
Explanation for what?
For everything in this world that ever happened to me that I don't understand, that I never will.
You see, Holly herself is unexplainable. She was born with this tremendous gift of memory, being able to name who was pitching in every game of the World Series, for example, or being able to tell the exact height of a building just by looking at it. Her gift was so inexplicable that scientists performed tests on her as a child. There was no explanation for it. Therefore, in her mind, it was a gift from God. If she can exist, why not other inexplicable things? As her investigation into the murder of Frankie Peterson continues, any logical person would be stumped, but not Holly, who is able to expand her sense of reality and believe.
Perhaps the first step to seeing things clearly is not to find a way to dismiss those facts, but to expand your sense of what reality might entail.
Take a look at Ralph here, who facepalms in disbelief when he hears Holly's crazy theory. He hasn't yet completed his character arc from non-believer to believer, but this will change for Ralph. In fact, it isn't until episode 5, exactly halfway through the season, that his worldview begins to chip away with a visit from his dead son. He of course brushes it off as a dream, just like he brushes off his wife Jeannie's vision of the hooded man entering their home. For him, there must always be a reasonable explanation. That's why he doesn't even bother having the chair the hooded man sat in tested for residue, a chair Holly will later find covered in the same unknown substance that was found in the barn where El Cuco transformed in episode 2. From episode 5 onward, a series of unexplainable events happen that shifts Ralph's worldview. For example, the drawing of El Cuco by his wife and the young boy who also saw him, or Holly's theories how the monster operates coming true, and the eventual attempted murder of Holly by Jack. Who and what El Cuco is at the core of how Holly and the other investigators go about trying to stop it. In episode 6, Holly explains her findings that an entity she'll call El Cuco, based off Latin American folklore, is the cause of a string of child murders. It needs to feed every 24 to 27 days in order to gain its strength, preferring young children because
they taste the sweetest.
After it kills, however, it must shed its skin like a snake and transform, making it extremely weak and vulnerable. It will use a slave like Jack or Tracy to perform certain errands for it while it's in this vulnerable state. Errands like collecting lamps and food. These quote-unquote slaves are not to be confused with the beings it transforms into, like Terry or Claude. The difference being that the doppelgangers can only be created via direct contact, as in blood, which manifests itself in the show through through scratching. Maria Canales, a woman convicted of killing a young boy, scratches Heath Hofstetter, who goes on to kill 2 young girls. Then he goes to scratch Terry Maitland, who kills Frankie Peterson, who in turn scratches Claude. It's Holly who discovers that the time in between these murders is about 24 to 27 days, leading her to believe that's the cycle this entity uses to feed. The slaves, on the other hand, are weak individuals who have a history of immense pain, which El Cuco feeds off and can manipulate. Jack is the perfect candidate. His wife left him, he's a drunk who had an overbearing mother, and had spent his entire life training to be a sniper, only to fail his final psych evaluation, never being able to fulfill his dream. Jack struggles throughout the season trying to fight the entity that's taking control of him, but eventually succumbs to its will. El Cuco doesn't just take a child victim, it likes to take its entire family and feed off its grief.
It likes to linger. All that grief down there. What a feast.
The perfect example of this is the Peterson family. After the death of Frankie, Mrs. Peterson suffers some sort of stroke and dies. This leads Ollie to shoot Terry, which leads to Ollie's death, and eventually Mr. Peterson, the only one left, to hang himself. The death of one spiraled into the death of the entire family, and El Cuco feeds off this.
It's drawn to pain. Pain is its wine.
If El Cuco doesn't feed, he gets weak, which is shown through his gradual physical decline, as seen through the series of drawings done by Merlin and Janine. In the final episode, our investigators have tracked down El Cuco in a cave that collapsed back in 1947, trapping and killing more than 34 souls. Remember that El Cuco loves to rest up in locations where there is a lot of grief, hence him previously choosing the barn that's near a graveyard. He has taken on the form of Claude Bolton, former proprietor of the Peach Crease strip club, and knows the others are on their way. You see, El Cuco has the ability to know the thoughts of the person he has taken over, and stupid SEALE Bolton, Claude's brother, let it slip they were on their way. In a tragic twist of irony, the man who dreamed of being a sniper uses his sniper skills to kill Holly's love interest, Andy Cutcavage, Alec Pelly, and Howard Solomon before killing himself. Holly and Ralph go on to investigate the cave, and Holly notes that El Cuco can probably be killed, a question she and the others have often asked, noting that its residue can be found along the handrails going down into the cave. Her reasoning is that an entity that isn't scared would likely not be holding onto the rails. Deeper into the cave, past the corpses of eaten animals and the names of those who died in the collapse, they finally come face to face with El Cuco. He's curious how Holly was able to find out about him, and not only that, convince others too. This hints that this entity has been around for quite some time, completing this cycle over and over again. Holly even asks him if there are others like him, to which he says he can sense there are more, but doesn't know for sure. The predicament they find themselves in is that they can't use their firearms. The cave is extremely unstable, and any loud noises could trigger a collapse. Of course, the real Claude comes ambling in and does exactly that, shooting El Cuco and triggering a cave-in. As the dust settles, Holly, Ralph, and the real Claude stumble out. Holly even looks over the body of the seemingly dead El Cuco and says a very weird line in response to Ralph, saying that Terry can now be exonerated. She says, "Who's Terry?" Remember that her memory is amazing, and this just goes to show you that the hunt for El Cuco has totally consumed her, and she's forgotten what she was hired to do in the first place, to clear Terry's name. As they make their way out, Ralph decides to go back. He's also briefly visited by the ghosts of his son and that of Ollie, almost as if they're looking at him to finish the job, because El Cuco isn't dead. Ralph ends up smashing El Cuco's face in, opting not to turn him into some scientific experiment to be prodded by scientists. But before he does, El Cuco shapeshifts in multiple different forms, likely the people he had shifted into from his past. We also get this slow dolly in on what appears to be the hoodie belonging to El Cuco, which he used throughout the season. Holly, Ralph, and the others also decide to get their story straight so that when they're questioned about what really went down here, there aren't any holes in their story, and Terry's name can be exonerated. After all, who would believe an unbelievable tale about shapeshifters? The Georgia DA, Kenneth Hayes, tells Glory that her husband has been exonerated due to the new developments in the case. But what I find more interesting is this short scene in episode 9, where he's informed a young boy was found naked and mauled just like Frankie Peterson was. But apparently El Cuco was busy transforming into Claude at this time and going after kids in Tennessee, not Georgia. Even though I know Georgia Georgia and Tennessee are right next to each other. This is the biggest hint that there are other El Cucos out there, but I'm also aware it is possible it could be the same one. Jeannie ends up burning the chair El Cuco left his residue on as a final FU. She also tells Glory that she probably shouldn't mention the whole supernatural stuff when she's questioned, since it might interfere with her husband's exoneration. And finally, Ralph says goodbye to Holly and says he'd like to work with her again. He's now a full believer in things that sometimes never make sense. Holly goes on to say how El Cuco asked her how she was open to believing his existence, saying, "An outsider knows an outsider. She herself has been an outsider her whole life. She knows that what seems unbelievable is possible because she exists, a woman who can remember everything." Ralph also opens up to his wife about seeing Derek, their son, something he would have never done previously. He even says maybe next time he appears it'll be the real Derek. The Ralph from episode 1 would never have believed that to be possible. They leave a rose on their son's grave as we fade out on the grave of Frankie Peterson, who is also buried in the same cemetery and whose death sparked the events of this entire season, bringing things full circle. And I hope you stayed around for the post-credit scene which sees Holly experience a vision of Jack, the man who murdered her love, and checking to see if she has a rash on the back of her neck. But while she's checking her laptop to see how things are going in the Peterson case, 3 really weird things happen. First, the scratch on her arm, hinting that she was scratched by El Cuco and will become the next victim. Now, we never see how she got it, and in the scene where she's saying goodbye to Ralph, she does not have this scratch, so it would have to have been after the events in the cave. Second, and really mysterious, is that the shot here is done in reverse. I'll try to play it a few times, but there is no logical explanation for why it would be done this way. Finally, the song that comes on the radio is Washington Square, the same song Ralph told Holly about that played on the day of his son's birth and his mother's death 15 years apart, something Holly said was just a coincidence. To me, this ending has nothing to do with whether Holly is some sort of new El Cuco or not, but fits in with the broader theme of the show, which is believing the unbelievable and how we make sense of the unexplainable. We can't rationally explain with evidence and logic why she was cut, why that song plays, or why it's in reverse, because it can't be explained rationally. The show is testing us in this final scene. Are we going to look at it with facts and logic like Ralph, or will we need to expand our reality like Holly in order to explain the unexplainable? That's the point of this final scene. Which way do you see it? Thanks everyone for watching. Please make sure to give the video a like and subscribe. I'm always coming out with new videos. You can also follow me on Twitter at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember, Daddy loves you very much.